Welcome to Security Architecture Podcast, where we help cybersecurity professionals to stay ahead of the curve and ensure they are successful in their cybersecurity journey.
Hi, I'm Evgeny.
Hi, I'm Dimitri.
We have here Jason from Palo Alto. Jason, can you please introduce yourself and the company?
Sure, thank you. My name is Jason Georgi, Field CTO for Prisma Access and SaaS here at Palo Alto Networks.
So Jason, let's start with the first question. What's the name of the offering or the product that addressing the remote access, ZTNA?
The product's name is Prisma Access.
So we're here in Architecture Podcast, and we really would like to dive into the architecture, understand what is Prisma Access. We know from our past experience that it used to be Global Protect Cloud Services. So tell us a bit about the product, how it's architected, number of POPs, architecture, high availability.
Sure. So yeah, Prisma Access originally launched as Global Protect Cloud Service just over 3 years ago. And that was an evolution of our original firewall security software capability that started as the proprietary blend of PA series firewalls and then PAN-OS. A few years later, PAN-OS was abstracted from PA series to be more software-based, hardware neutral. And then the last evolution of that, or the latest evolution of that, was then taking the software and porting it to the cloud to make it an elastic cloud service. So now it was also meant for cloud delivery. And in July of 2019, it became more cloud agnostic because we expanded from GPCS's original footprint into Google Cloud Platform. And that coincided with the rebranding of GPCS to Prisma Access. And the Prisma branding was all about how Palo was going to deliver next generation or cloud security services under a certain, branding umbrella, if you will. So the organization kind of divided itself up into how it was delivering security or the primary delivery method. So it was around secure the enterprise, which was a lot of the on-prem solutions such as PA series firewalls, VM firewalls, secure the cloud, which was the Prisma suite of capabilities, including Prisma Access, Prisma SaaS, and Prisma Public Cloud. And secure the future, which is the Cortex line of capabilities, which is around endpoint or host detection and response, security orchestration, automation and response, data lake for machine learning, and our application framework as far as threat intel. So that everything kind of evolved. It's around that theme last summer. So Global Protect Cloud Service evolved to Prisma Access, which is where we are today. So that's kind of that transition between the two. The core functionality, meaning the security inspection and everything around it, is largely unchanged, other than the security capabilities we've added to the entire set of essentially PAN-OS. So as PAN-OS continues to evolve, so will the security. And that's very intentional. We did not want to go out and buy some solution to complement what we had in this particular space, because when we look at the type of access use cases and the traffic flows, they're all the same. They're the same whether the user's on-prem going to a data center app, on-prem going to cloud, at home going to cloud or data center. The application traffic is evolving, but it's much the same. And we wanted to make sure that the security posture and thus the inspection ability between the user and the application or service they were accessing remain consistent. Also a way to look at all traffic flows, regardless of where on the network that user or the application may be. So it's just a way to keep it consistent. And now to paint a picture instead of 1,000 more words, I will go ahead and share a diagram with you guys. The way the architecture flows, it really starts off as, this handles both remote access, so our topic for today, but it's also for anything else that needs access to a resource anywhere, regardless of where they are. So the user could be anywhere, at home, in the office, on the go, and the resource could be data center, cloud, SaaS, or web, doesn't matter. We envision and have the architecture looking like the Prisma Access Security Cloud essentially becomes the hub. And the cloud is a multi-cloud environment that is monolithic to our customers. So it's also provided by public cloud security providers. So like I said before, AWS and GCP are how we deliver the service. And with that, we get all of the edge ingress points of both across the globe, as well as all the compute processing power that comes with that. So users connect in at their closest possible edge gateway, and from there they are immediately attached or at least shuttle fibered to security inspection. So we do full layer 7 inspection. The same security that we would have on our PA series firewalls running Global Protect is done now at a cloud elastically. So users are immediately being scanned. So only clean traffic is essentially then going to its destination. In this case, with the drawing, it's going to the data center. But with the cloud's ability to route and things like that, it's a single platform routing users to any destination that they see fit. So if they're going to cloud or SaaS, there's no need to hairpin. The cloud will route them to either SaaS or public cloud services, doesn't matter. And with that, with the ability that we have with hosting through AWS and GCP, we have native tier 1 peering on the backbone. So this is part of the architecture itself, including a fully fiber meshed architecture between edge and compute locations, ingress and egress across the cloud. I'll go ahead and pause there to see if you have any other questions.
Jason, if I am trying to connect to my data center, is the traffic still will go to your cloud, or it will go direct to the data center if I have a PA there?
That's up to you. So this can also be configured in a hybrid architecture if that's what makes sense for the organization or regional users. But to us and to the platform, a Global Protect gateway is a Global Protect gateway, whether it's on-prem or whether it's part of Prisma Access. So within the GP client, what you would see is, well over 100 locations available when using Prisma Access. But if your organization had a gateway or two of on-prem legacy GP, or for developers that were going to do high intensity access localized to something in a data center or something like that, it would just show up as additional mobile user gateways within GP. So
what if I don't have a Palo Alto firewall in my data center?
Then anything that can build an IPsec tunnel to Prisma Access for what is called a service connection is a viable option. So that can be a router, a firewall of another type. It doesn't really matter. All we're doing between the data center and Prisma Access Security Cloud is building an IPsec tunnel that's bidirectional to get users in that need access resources in the data center, or for data center resources to access cloud and internet services themselves in a secure way. So you can, eliminate some of that egress gateway from the data center as well.
So if I'm in Toronto and my data center in Australia, somehow recently we always in Australia, or maybe because you want to go there. How will my traffic route? Would it go to your cloud or out inside your cloud? Would it go to the first gateway and from there go to Australia?
Yeah. Let's just say, for example, this user right here, the second one from the top, is that Toronto user, and the data center is sitting in Australia. The user will ingress the closest gateway to them, Toronto or somewhere else in Ontario, and then traverse the cloud's fiber backbone. This is leveraging the GCP premium fiber network. So it will do a what would amount to a trans-Pacific route, I'm sure, over to the Australia service connection, wherever this data center is connecting up, whatever Australian ingress gateway, or I guess bidirectional gateway, would be there. And we do have points of presence in Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of Southeast Asia. So that would be a local connection. But the entire middle mile, or I would say several thousand middle miles, is covered by the cloud's fiber backbone itself. So the transit is from the user starts in Toronto or somewhere in eastern central Canada, and then would traverse the fiber network to Australia, New Zealand region.
How would you decide if to use the AWS or Google Cloud?
It just depends on what you're connected to. So the cloud is monolithic to our customers. So there's no differentiation in say the configuration within our management interface to which cloud providers which. It's just the cloud. So everything is combined. So it just depends on where the destination is and where the user is to where they would ingress, and then there are routing handoffs between the clouds if necessary, based on some of that peering or to provide more optimal performance. For the most part, just given the size and the breadth of the network itself, GCP tends to be the most used network. But between AWS and GCP, their architectures internally are much the same in that their ingress to compute and egress locations are all fully meshed.
Okay. What will happen with like Zoom traffic, for example, Office 365? It will still go inside the tunnel?
It certainly can. Now, some customers may choose to offload certain things. We prefer our customers inspect everything they can, including YouTube, so send it through. But yeah, what would happen, Office 365, for example, same user, they're going to come in, ingress wherever they are. Full traffic inspection begins at layer 7. So this is where we apply the user ID to app ID policy as well. So if you've got a zero trust architecture implemented or something like that, where you're truly building layer 7 connections based on user to application policy, user's going to ingress, be inspected, policy checked, and everything else, writing fiber to the tier 1 POP that we have as part of our cloud architecture, and then accessing Office 365 directly from that. And the funny thing about this, well, not funny, it's serious for our customers, but due to this architecture and the fiber connectivity and the warm handoff between our cloud and Azure, we are able to provide SLA performance, around certain SaaS applications, including Office 365, Salesforce, G Suite, Box, and Slack. So these are the first 5 we've done, but others will come. But this is an idea of how we're trying to help our users out with performance.
Right. So it brings us to the next question. How do you license your product? Is it based on seats or bandwidth or user?
So by default, and I would say the most popular way to consume right now, given all the mobile users that are out there, is per user. So that would be your more default profile for pricing. That being said, we are flexible. There are plenty of offices that are more really surrounding secure the branch. So they could have varying numbers of users, or it could be some type of kiosk or things environment where there's a whole lot of traffic that isn't really user defined or user authenticated. So with that, bandwidth may be a better option for those particular sites. So we have the ability to charge customers by aggregated bandwidth from their remote sites or remote network locations, mobile users, or a blend of both. But with that, we make sure that if we have a set of offices that are being charged by bandwidth, and those offices empty out, users go home, we're making sure that we're not double charging them also then for a mobile user license, because if users are taking their security and their bandwidth with them, there would be no overcounting. So it really just depends on how that customer wants to consume the service. If bandwidth makes sense, given their price point and how they like to maybe do a cross charge internally to their own customers, if you're an internal service provider or something like that, and say you're providing bandwidth to locations at X amount per month with a management fee, you may just want to add the security adder as part of that. So they could do that. If they choose to not worry too much about the bandwidth side, but want to make sure that all their mobile users are covered all the time because they're a highly mobile organization, or a lot of heavy power users are working off-prem instead of on-prem these days, then mobile user options a good choice for them. But in any case, we're very flexible on how we do that.
Makes sense. And the Prisma Access, can you license it as a product on its own, or it's an add-on product to something else?
It's completely standalone. So Prisma Access is its own capability. Now, what it does, and if I build this out one more click, there we go. Prisma Access, in addition to remote access, is also secure internet or web gateway capabilities built into the single platform. So there's no differentiation from our perspective as far as where the user wants to go. The cloud will route them based on policy and destination. So when you purchase Prisma Access as a remote access solution, you get the ability to do secure internet gateway as well with that as part of it. So, but it doesn't require anything else as far as other firewalls or anything in the branch. We can connect any other technology up from the data center or a cloud VPC or a branch office into Prism Access, as long as it can build an IPsec tunnel. From the client or user perspective, it's the GP client, or we do have a clientless option as well.
When I connect from home, I usually need some kind of identity, because you cannot create rules by my source IP. Elaborate a bit more about how you guys work with different identity providers, please.
Yeah, sure. So we work with pretty much any SAML, any LDAP that's out there. So Okta, Ping, ADFS, so all of the ways you'd want to authenticate, we work with. And we also work with multi-factor authentication. We transparently proxy the user. So any application that's out there that allows MFA, and you can do it through, say, your whatever web top you happen to be using, is supported by Prisma Access. We don't have any limitations in that respect. What we are able to do as well, so when we talk about adaptive access and zero trust, is in conjunction with our Cortex, one of our Cortex capabilities, we are able to leverage that to determine, let's say, trusted or untrusted IP addresses to enact multi-factor authentication. So you may say from a branch office, that if you see a user coming from there, it's a single threaded authentication or single factor authentication. But if they're coming from a cafe or from home or a place you just don't know, right? You can then challenge them for MFA if that's something you want to do as an extra step. And if something happens within that session or it can't be completed, you can trigger that to force a reauth or to terminate and force the user to reestablish a session. So we have many ways to play around with the authentication capabilities that are out there native to all of you. You don't have to, we're not an IDP ourselves, we're not going to provide you authentication services. So we work with everybody that's out there for the most part.
Most of the people today, they're using their browser, both for internet browsing and work. And it goes all the way from sales accounting to even reviewing code. Can you give us some more examples about your clientless capabilities, what can be done, and what kind of functionalities and features you have there?
Sure. Yeah. And we see both deployments quite a lot, really. And so we have the full client option, which is our Global Protect client that can run on several device endpoints: Mac, Windows, Linux, iOS, Android. So runs across the board as far as that goes. And what you get with that is that the richer capability to do certain posture checks on the device itself, right? You can see into the device better. You can understand what it's doing, get authentication and cookie information a little bit better, or certificate information. All of those things, are a little more robust with the full GP client. Now, for those that either don't have that ability, can't load a client on, say, a third party, or you've got a BYO scenario, or something else going on, we do have clientless access, which is browser based. So that's our SSL VPN capability. And with that, the way that works is you get a URL, you click or open it, you get a page. You're forced to authenticate, like SSO, so whatever SSO provider you have, and then you will see what amounts to a web top, very similar to an IDP would provide you. And then therefore you have tiles, and you click the tile to the application you're being granted access to. Now, this is part of our user ID, app ID policy set. So you define by user what applications they have access to. So it is a layer 7 based policy. It is not connecting a network to a network. So user to application. Now, the beauty of clientless and the adaptive access part of this policy is I could be a user that has GP and a laptop, the company issued laptop running that client. But if I'm coming in over BYO with clientless access or something like that, or some other type of device, my access can be restricted to the same set of applications or fewer applications. If it's the same set, maybe I can only view or download or upload or whatever combination based on the risk of not managing that device. So it's browser based, or you get the full, the better experience, the better security and risk check with the GP client. But we have those options available for organizations' employees, their third parties, contractors, sometimes students. Whatever mix they feel is beneficial for their organization. They're all available, or they're both available, and there's no additional charge for clientless access.
Yeah. So the clientless access is part of the Prisma Access portal.
Yes,
and
it is.
I don't need the firewall on-prem or anything like that.
No, and when you click that tile and you're sent to that application, it's not like it's just a redirect either. It is actually going through Prism Access, which is the firewall capability. So that session is going to be inspected. That is if the customer chooses to do so by policy, because it would require SSL decryption, obviously an inspection of the session in line. But if that's what the customer wants to do, especially in the case of third parties or contractor access, where maybe they do want to make sure that they're looking at that traffic session, they can do that. So we do have that ability because it's flowing right through that cloud instance firewall, not a firewall on-prem.
From protocol perspective, it's probably more aligned to the client version. What protocols do you support? For example, can you do what? Can you do file share? Can I have a password change?
Absolutely. So one of the beauties of it being a firewall-based architecture is the fact that it doesn't have protocol dependencies like, say, a web proxy architecture does. And this isn't a Palo versus vendor A or B conversation. It's an architecture conversation. And the reality is the web proxy's ability to transact certain client to application communications, especially with real-time protocols like UDP or whatever else, those are very challenging if they're connectionless. And that's often what you need. A proxy by design is meant to do that termination of a session, reestablish on behalf of the user, that full proxying capability. If you're a firewall-based architecture, it's more of that stateful user stream of traffic, where a user may be proxied for authentication or may be proxied for SSL decrypt, but it's not handling the session in quite the same way. So really, as long as any protocol you would use in your environment if you would use a firewall, say a Palo Next Gen Firewall PA series in your data center to secure traffic to and from any one of those environments internally, you could use Prism Access to do the exact same thing. There's no difference in how that would be applied. Forming connections on our client list.
So if I'm connected to network A and I'm moving now to network B, would it disconnect my connection or it will remain open?
Well, so that would be something you define most likely, and you can define that in terms of types of locations. So if a user's coming in or roaming across a trusted set of locations or trusted IP addresses, you could have that session calling back to reestablish on behalf of the user. If you say any change in posture or network force the restart of the session, you can do that, which is a pretty much a default practice that we see because of potential of device theft, credential theft, anything that could change the behavior of the session in real time, you would want to re-challenge. Now, some organizations, they get concerned about that, too many challenges to their employees as they're roaming, buildings, campus, home, whatever they're doing. So you can define that to be more lax than re-challenge every time something changes. But it's really up to the customer at that point to determine at what tolerance they want to have to figure out when they want to have a user reestablish themselves through authentication or a new certificate.
You mentioned a bit about reporting and about conditional sign-on and conditional different other conditions. Can you elaborate more about reporting capabilities or potentially, as you mentioned, user behavior? Maybe I'm going to block a user based on something or allow you to do more.
Yeah. So Prism Access default logging capability is to our data lake. So we have large cloud repositories called Cortex Data Lake that Prism Access logs to, and we've got the ability with that to do on the fly machine learning. So we're leveraging the data lake across several different capabilities we have too, which include our endpoint security client that's called Cortex XDR. has the ability to log to that too, to gain telemetry. So when you combine what's happening on the endpoint plus what's happening in real time with network security traffic flows, you can write different rules or you let the machine learning of that determine that we have some type of suspicious activity, but then you couple that with, say, our Cortex XOR, ability, or even some of the rules that come with XDR that say, if we see this condition, do X, right? Force a reauth or force multi-factor authentication to kick in if we're seeing them coming from this particular IP address or not a trusted IP address. You can define all different types of rules in your playbooks to determine how you want to react to a user's behavior. And that could be purely natural behavior that happens over the course of time, or something that you may deem suspicious, right? I'm coming to you from Chicago right now. All of a sudden, my G Suite is attempting to be accessed from my other home in Fort Myers for some reason. Shouldn't be happening right now. I'm here. Disconnect both, right? So that type of logging, into that central repository that's gaining that telemetry can thus feed our SOAR capability to say, okay, now do this. So it all works together. It's meant to be part of a enterprise ecosystem as far as security goes, to kind of take a look at all the traffic flows that are happening, not just collect data, because data is only as good as what you have, but provide the context to actually then get smarter about what we're trying to do to mitigate threats. So, it starts with Cortex Data Lake as that logging repository. Now, immediately you can send that logging right down to a SIM. So we work with every SIM that's out there, but leveraging the data lake to work with, some of those other SOC automation and orchestration technologies can really, provide a more robust threat response, that's quicker and in more real time.
Jason, is the data lake you mentioned right now, it's an additional license for Prisma Access, or something is included?
There is something included. So based on the number of users, you get a certain amount of data lake. But then if you want additional storage, like longer periods of time and things like that, then we can do that. So it's really up to the customer how much retention they want in the cloud versus to then send that data back into their SIM or whatever local or even cloud-based logging repository.
Great. Jason, thank you very much. We're kind of done with the official part of the show.
Okay.
And we want to switch to open topics. So we have a few questions, and if you want to share anything else, if you would like to do it as well. I know Palo Alto has a lot of different products, and you mentioned some of them. My question is, how many of your customers use Prisma Access with conjunction on something else? For example, if you use Prisma Access, but they use some kind of different technology, maybe for remote desktop or for web access, how would this work?
So it's as flexible as the customer needs it to be. We do have plenty of customers that, well, let me take a step back. Prisma Access is meant to be in line with what Gartner launched last summer, that Secure Access Service Edge, or the SASE architecture, right? So it's meant to be a platform that handles as many use cases as the customer wants to throw at it in a single solution. So, but there's always a compelling event that gets a customer to the table first, whether it's remote access or VPN replacement or secure web gateway replacement, network transformation, whatever it is, something happens first. So, given the fact that the cloud can route, it can be an extension of the customer's network to just do what they need it to do. So if you only need it to do web security for now, and then run it alongside another VPN capability as much as or as long as they need to until that expires, they can just forward traffic via IPsec one way or another based on policy. So 80 and 443 traffic goes to Prism Access, and you define that. Or, if it's for remote access only, then depending on what you want to do, you can split traffic out for the remote client, or from the branch perspective, you use your SD-WAN policy or other local policy to say, okay, if this user's coming in from remote access, for the data center side, okay, we egress back out that service connection to return the traffic to them. If it's the user coming in from somewhere, wherever it is, we handle that. And if they've got, say, an on-prem secure web gateway left, when they hit that data center, then they will egress and hairpin out to the internet. So it's really flexible depending on the customer need. The cloud can handle where they need to go, wherever they need to go. But then over time, the idea is to try to get them to, do more with Prisma Access so that it can do its natural thing by routing the user anywhere they need to go, whether it's data center, private cloud, SaaS, or web.
Great. Anything else you want to share?
Really, I was just going to, mention the fact that, that SASE part, the component. I would say that, the reality is remote access and VPN resiliency is probably one of the biggest topics I've seen in my entire career over the last 7 months. And the beauty of what Prism Access does, because we leverage public cloud architecture, is that it has the ability to auto scale the mobile user gateways. So if there's a high bandwidth event going on, and such as a software push or a webcast or something like that, and we have APIs in our cloud apps monitoring that cloud for that type of traffic, we will increase the customer instance as needed as part of that event. When the event's over, it descales automatically. There's nothing to call us ahead for to say, hey, we have this going on. Can you make sure we have capacity? It just happens as part of the cloud's architecture. And there's no additional cost for that service either. It's just part of what it does. So, when we talk about, Palo Alto has really always been around the threat prevention side. Now we're really getting into that business continuity side too, because we can provide this cloud service. It's distributing those head ends for the remote access, providing that fiber meshed, global cloud backbone to get user from A to B or A to B to C. And then the auto scaling capability that's there for the mobile user gateways. It's really providing a very nice and robust solution to counter a lot of what they're going through right now, which is unpredictability, right? That's what everybody's trying to figure out, is how do I mitigate risk for what I don't know? And the best way you can do that is have these services that are that hyperscale and available.
I have a quick question. You mentioned that part of Prisma Access is getting multiple features, the secure web gateway and ZTNA remote access. Do you have any DLP components there as well?
We do. And so what you're going to start to see, and our customers and your viewers here, Palo's security capabilities are going to continue to be cloud-based from their own perspectives. So we have a newer DLP service. It's several months old, but that is its own cloud security capability that all of the Palo components consume. So it's the same as our Wildfire behaves. So that's a cloud of its own, world's largest threat intel cloud. DLP is the same. Our DNS security, our URL database, our PanDB, all of those are cloud-based and microservices and container-based cloud microservices. So those are all collecting information, getting smarter as we go. And then the PA series firewall, VM firewall, Prisma SaaS, Prisma Access, they're all just consumers of that information. So our new DLP service, which is machine learning based, and we're going to continue to add certain functionality that customers ask for, is really meant to be that that ability to or become that new enterprise data protection ability that so many have been seeking, that is purely cloud based, because it can be consumed by the endpoint agents. It can be consumed by on-prem firewalls or even workload security, so that if you define your data protection policy locally once, you can extend it to wherever your data repositories are, data center, cloud, SaaS, inline, at rest, all of it working together, and two, logging to the data lake. So we get that full context capability too. So you understand, exactly what's happening in your environment with your data, whether it's in transit or who's accessing it at rest, or who's trying to access it or manipulate it once it's there. So all that stuff is coming around. And so that's the strategy. It's a strategy for everything that we're doing now. Everything that we have as a service like that is going to be cloud-based in its own right, and then have all the services that we have for security enforcement and censoring be consumers of those services.
Jason, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I guess when we get to the DLP's part of our show, we'll have to talk to you guys again and bring you back.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and join us for our next episode.